Hey gang, today we're going to do a build guide in the Meshlicious ITX case. You guys are interested in some of the mods, and essentially this video is going to cover what you need to know to build inside the case.
Jumping right in, for this build, we're going to be using a 240mm AIO that I have around with two Scythe Wonder Snail fans. One thing to note is that this case does include this neat bracket system that you can use to install a 240mm AIO or remove and install a 280mm AIO, which is handy, I guess. What most of you guys may know already is that this case uses a sandwich layout, and that just means you have the motherboard on one side and a GPU on the other side. That makes for a great accommodation of space, a great utilization of space. You can fit a full-length graphics card in here, and and that's not where this case ends. Actually, it's actually a great modular case, and what I mean by that is its flexibility. You see, it has these three slots in the back, and what that allows for you to do is to install a short card. Now, if you were to install a short card in this case, which I've never done before, you have to, interesting enough, look at the back and learn that you install it upside down. Um, and and you just do that by kind of just removing this cable here and sliding it in like so. Now we're just playing around with placement here, but in case you wanted to use this case to hold a couple large spinning hard drives, you then can accommodate that desire with a short graphics card, and you can fit up to, I think, two spinning hard drives on this bracket, or I think maybe three SSD drives. But how I think most users will utilize this space is by using a full-length graphics card. I'm going to try to plug this in here. One of the interesting thing is that after you attach your card, you'll notice that the ports that you use to connect to your monitor is facing downwards, and that could provide some trouble for longer HDMI cables or longer display cables. And unless you have an adapter, the cable might potentially stick out the bottom there. So let me just plug in this adapter here, and this is a relatively easy remedy for this problem. You just plug in your adapter and you shimmy it out the back. Now this the case provider does include a HDMI cord that is angled, but I have a feeling nobody will be actually using that cord, just because it's not really an extension. It's a HDMI male to male instead of male to female port, like this connector here. Another easy remedy for this potential problem is using rubber feet. Now you can just buy this on Amazon, and it's adhesive. You just stick it on anywhere in the case, and that's it. Now let's talk about power supplies. This case is really easy to pick a PSU for, and what I would recommend most is probably just sticking with the Corsair SF models. They're great. Corsair is probably the market leader in this niche domain, and you just can't go wrong with a unit from them. What I have here is a Silverstone model, and it's a SFX-L power supply, and I'm just using this just because it's a left to right unit that I have, and I'm using the stock cables. And as we continue, I'm gonna show you probably the best way to cable manage in this case. Now, if you're thinking about air cooling in this case, one of your better option is the Noctua NHL12S. Now this one is the L12, which would work as well without the additional fan, but that'll just give you enough clearance to touch that the side panel there. Now before I reinstall this motherboard back in this case, which I had it on there earlier for testing, I just wanted to note that I shift over this I/O shield to accommodate the additional height we'll be adding.
So yeah, so these are just 20mm standoffs. And why 20mm standoffs is because this case accommodates a shift in the spine. And that was meant for even thicker graphics cards. Like this case can accommodate a 3-slot graphics card, but if you're using something that is just like a dual slot card, you don't need that extra GPU space. So instead of just letting that that option there, the small form factor community discovered that they can shift this bracket, which was here, down to that slot where you would use for a longer or a thicker graphics card. Like you could really fit a beefy graphics card in here if you need to. So what is the benefit of using the standoff mod in this build? Cable management. So by simply going out and buying yourself a set of standoffs that includes a 20mm variant, it's M3 screws, I believe, and this one is acrylic, I believe. So you can get one that is made out of different materials, like a metal for sturdier. But this one does the job just fine for me. And all you need to do essentially is screw it into your motherboard standoff currently, and that increases that space behind the motherboard from that tiny little what was it? From that tiny little slot provided, which was maybe 6mm to now 26mm. And what that allows is for you to just run all your cables right behind the motherboard. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we went ahead and put the standoffs in each of the motherboard mounting holes. And then what you do is you run your power supply cables right behind where the motherboard is supposed to be. For this video, we are using the Asus Strix 390i, I think it's called. This is a great motherboard for 8th gen and 9th gen Intel chips. It's just problem solving. Alright, let's try this again. So the 24-pin cable is the one that's the hardest to situate in this build. And I mean, for most builds in small form factors, the one that cable takes up the most space. Alright, so now that you can run the cable behind the motherboard, you can really just, I'm making it sound easier than it is, but with a little bit of effort and diligence, I suppose, the 24-pin cable can slide right beneath your motherboard and sit without too much bulk. And then your 8-pin connector on top from behind the motherboard can connect. You guys can see like the mess of cable management is pretty much resolved when you use that modification. The standoffs give so much extra space in between the spine here. Can you guys see that? It's just look at all the space for cable management now. Look at that. Now you can, I'm just using stock cables here. Like there's no custom length cables at all. Let me mount the AIO now. You see I mounted my motherboard in, and I'm just realizing I forgot to put in my AIO back mount support. So this goes behind the motherboard. And because now that I implemented that modification, I have a feeling I can just, you know, install this regardless of the motherboard being plugged in the back. I can just put it through the back here. And that, look at all that space that oh man, so easy. Like, oops, I forgot to mount my bracket before I mounted my motherboard. No problem.
Another benefit of using this taller standoff modification is that in the back of the motherboard, given you have additional space, you can use a SSD NVMe drive with a tall heatsink. Now, I don't have one installed in this build, but you can fit up to I guess, 20 millimeter tall heatsink drive in the back of your motherboard now, and don't have to worry about overheating versus using just the one that is provided in the front of the motherboard. Let's now apply some thermal paste. One quick tip I can give you before applying thermal paste is just give the surface area a quick wipe down with some alcohol right before you do it. Keeps the area clean, and alcohol relatively dries very quickly. So once you do that, I like to apply my thermal paste in a X pattern. I find it better than the P pattern in terms of surface area. And once you do that, you figure out where you want your leads to come out of in terms of orientation. And once you figure that out, you just screw it down.
Alright, we just mounted the AIO after installing the motherboard, which in most cases is pretty hard to even consider doing, but you know, again, this case is really easy to work on and work in. Alright, so I had to remove the AIO here because I had to exchange the fan grill from the bottom slot fan, which I thought would have problems with the PSU, and I'm going to put it on the top fan because that's the one that's really experiencing issues with all the cables that's being plugged in for the front I/O of the case and whatnot. So just changing things. But what I noticed that could be beneficial is, and I guess since this is the build guide, you might want to install your AIO radiator after you put in the motherboard. That way, you can just squeeze everything more diligently.
Should we plug back the USB thing that was so hard?
Yeah, we should do that.
Now that it's open.
It's really hard to mount this thing. There you go. And also you can put in the USB 2. I'm just going to finish switching the fan protector here. So grab yourself a fan splitter. Plug your fans in, tug it in the back, and that's it. You're hooked up. There's a tiny back if you want. Alright guys, so the last thing you want to do is just plug in your GPU. So how do we route this guy? The best way to do it is through the back cavity here. The 2080. Alright, so what do I want to do with this leftover cable? What I could do is just kind of cable manage it down the side of the case there, kind of like that. Maybe make it look... This is not supposed to be a cable management video, but I guess it's a build guide. So I hope it will help you guys understand what you could do with your super long stock cables. And I think I'm gonna figure out maybe a zip tie here. Alright, guys, gang, that's how you assemble a super clean build in the Meshlicious. I mean, you can continuously, you know, add more cable management, but I think that looks super clean. Plug in your fan. Tuck the cable in the back, and then with that double-sided tape you can have it just sit on the back of this little fold support beam there, and voila, it sits. There, there you go. Oh man, does it spin? Yep. Alright, front, I mean, it's an older radiator, but as soon as you put on this mesh panel, can't even see. Look at that. Oh man, this case is super pretty. I mean, it's a pretty case, it's easy to work in, and I really hope this guide has helped you guys or inspired you guys to build into it. This has been my Meshlicious build guide, and honestly guys, this is so easy to assemble. Look at that. Look how beautiful that looks. Alright, let's put these in. Side panels in. Guys, this is, I hope I helped.